Hey guys, tonight we drift far, far back, along the slow curl of the Nile, where the reeds sway in the warm dusk breeze, and the stars appear just a little earlier than you expect. You're barefoot on packed earth, the smell of wet clay in your nose, and all you want is to lie down and rest. But you reach for your pillow, and surprise, it's a slab of carved wood that you've just stepped into ancient Egypt, where even sleep was stylized. Tonight, we're easing into the lives of the quietest craftspeople of all, the pillow makers, not the fluffy, feathery kind. No, these were artisans of calm and function, masters of the headrest, those gently curved blocks that cradled the skull just enough to let dreams seep in. And like everything in Egypt, it wasn't just about comfort. It was symbolic, ritualistic, and probably gave you a stiff neck. You probably wouldn't survive a night on one, to be honest. But someone had to make these curious contraptions, right? And that job, sanded down by time, rarely written about but ever present, was theirs. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching from somewhere unexpected, post your location and local time. I love seeing where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Nile's air is thick and warm, wrapping around your skin like steamed linen. In the village outside Thebes, the sun has finally dipped below the palms. The date sellers are packing up. The kids have stopped kicking pebbles. And behind a modest mud brick courtyard, someone is finishing the final polish on a headrest made from sycamore figure. You hear no hammering,
no shouting, no barking over stairs.
Just a rhythmic brushing sound. Fine sand against wood, passed over the curved neck support again, and again and again. Ancient Egyptian pillow makers weren't known for flair. Their job wasn't glorious, and it definitely wasn't loud. It was silent work in service of sleep. And let's be clear, pillow here doesn't mean the kind you fluff and collapse into. The ancient Egyptian version was more like a small bench for your head, often no more than 15 inches long, with a gently concave upper ridge to cradle the neck. It lifted the head off the ground, thought to protect sleepers from insects, snakes, and possibly even evil spirits. You've got to love a design that blends basic hygiene with metaphysical defense. These headrests were made from a few materials, but most commonly wood. Stone was used occasionally, especially for those eternal sleep models tucked under mummies in gilded tombs. But for daily use, lightweight hardwoods were the choice. Sycamore fig was popular, but if you were wealthier, maybe cedar, imported with great effort from the Levant, found its way beneath your noble neck. Now, imagine being the person responsible for carving one of these. You don't just get a chunk of wood and start hacking. First, you select your material with great care. The grain must be even, the wood not free. A splinter in the neck is not part of a divine night's rest. Then you sketch your design. Most are standardized, but higher status clients might commission engravings of deities, protective spells, or even little animals to keep the dreams company. You bend over the block for hours, days, weeks, depending on the material and detail. Your tools are simple but effective. Copper chisels, polished flint scrapers, and eventually, fine sandstones used like prehistoric emery boards. Every motion is purposeful. You work in silence, not by law, but by tradition. This is considered near sacred labor, especially when the piece is for the dead. Historians still argue whether pillow makers were associated with temple crafts or operated independently in the artisan castes. Some suggest they were part of a broader funerary guild, while others think they were household servants who trained in this one very specific skill. What's agreed upon is that they left few marks. No signatures, no flamboyant tombs of their own. Just the quiet echo of their craft as you watch one now, seated cross-legged in linen wrapped around a sun-browned body. There's something meditative in the movement. His child brings him a gourd of barley water. The sun sinks further, and still he sands, and sands, and sands. Somewhere nearby, a merchant is testing whether he can market papyrus as a more flexible headrest filler. It won't catch on. Pillows will remain solid for another 1,000 years or so. It's funny to think how central sleep was to ancient Egyptian spiritual life. They believed dreams were messages, sometimes divine, sometimes deceptive. The headrest became not just a place of rest, but a literal platform for connecting with other realms. Place your head wrong, and you risk missing a visit from Thoth or Ra or that weird ibis-headed being who speaks in riddles. Even the placement mattered. You'd sleep on your side, neck gently propped up, likely wrapped in linens. There's a belief that this elevation allowed the soul easier exit and entry, a midnight commute to the dream world, if you will. No tolls required. And through it all, the pillow maker is never far. Not front and center, but in the background, his hands ensuring that the head, soul, and spirits all stayed in proper alignment. Not bad for a job with no fanfare. Now, let your eyes soften. Picture the curve of the finished piece. Smooth, clean, with maybe a lotus etched on one side. You run your hand along it. Cool wood, slight indent, faint scent of oil and ash. It looks simple. It's not. That's the thing about ancient Egypt. It makes the monumental out of the mundane. Even a humble headrest holds the echoes of cosmology, hygiene, class, craftsmanship, and dreams. And as you settle your own head tonight, maybe, just maybe, you'll feel a bit of that sacred silence underneath you too. The sun rises again over the Nile, and this time you're a little more aware of the soft slap of sandals on sand, the calls of fishermen down by the riverbank, and the wafting smell of onion stew simmering in some distant pot. But today, your focus is on something far less flavorful and far more curved. You wander through the quarter where craftworkers live. It's not grand, no colonnades or gold, but there's something methodical and comforting about it. Here, surrounded by scraps of wood and delicate dust motes suspended in the dry air, you find yourself watching a man lean over a low table. He's not shouting to co-workers or singing a work song. He's just focused, patient, chiseling a crescent into the top of a block. This is the hustle of headrest makers. You'd think pillows were soft, lazy luxuries, but in ancient Egypt, they were hard-won. Literally. These pillows were called wurs, and they came in several forms. The standard one, the kind you're probably imagining, looked like a miniature bench or pedestal with a scooped middle for the neck. Sometimes they were simple wooden pieces. Other times, especially in tombs, they were made of alabaster, basalt, or faience, a kind of glazed ceramic that gave off a bluish shine. Very chic for your eternal slumber. And if you were really someone, maybe you'd get a headrest carved with the face of Bes, the squat, lion-faced god of protection, who also happened to be the divine mascot of households, childbirth, and sleep. Because nothing says rest well like being watched over by a stout guardian with a tongue sticking out. It's a bit like placing a teddy bear at the foot of your memory foam pillow, only carved in stone and probably blessed by a priest. Now, the actual carving process was not flashy. You didn't see clouds of sawdust billowing out into the street. The artisans worked slowly in layers. First, rough shapes with copper tools. Then refinement with flint edges. Finally, smoothing with fine-grained sandstone, possibly collected from the edges of the desert. That last part is what you're watching now. The pillow maker doesn't speak. His mouth barely opens. He moves in rhythm. Scrape, rotate, sand, exhale. And it's not just about the tool, it's about listening. Not to voices, but to the grain of the wood. A good craftsman knows when the wood wants to bend and when it wants to split. It's like a silent conversation, and you're just barely allowed to overhear it. One of the most curious things is that pillow makers often doubled as carvers of funerary objects. After all, a wooden headrest used in daily life wasn't so different from the more ornate version placed under a mummy's head. So while your artisan by day crafted sleeping aids for grumpy farmers and tired scribes, by night, or more likely by commission, he could be working on a rest destined for eternity. Historians still debate whether this dual role made the craft more sacred or just more practical. Was the pillow maker considered a holy artisan or just a very skilled carpenter? Some scholars suggest that silence in the workshop wasn't just a tradition. It may have been a spiritual requirement, especially when working on burial items. Others argue that's a modern romanticization, and the quiet was simply a result of intensely detailed work. After all, have you ever tried filing ivory while talking? It doesn't go well. Occasionally, we get glimpses of the pillow-making process from tomb inscriptions. Not often, after all, this wasn't the kind of job kings celebrated in hieroglyphs. But in the tomb of Mekheter, a royal official of the Middle Kingdom, there's a model of a furniture workshop. Tiny figures lean over miniature tables, with what could easily be tiny headrests beside them. No names, just the suggestion of a trade that touched everyone, but rarely left its name behind. That's the odd paradox of the pillow maker. Everyone needed their product. Few remembered the hands that made it. You step further into the workshop. On a side wall, leaning against a reed mat, is a partially completed headrest. The base is rectangular, sturdy. The neck cradle isn't finished yet. It still has sharp edges. The artisan will round those down later with an oilstone, maybe finish it off with a beeswax rub.
No polished.
Just enough so it doesn't catch on linen when someone tries to doze. But here's something unexpected. Nearby, a younger worker, likely an apprentice, is inscribing a faint hieroglyph onto the base. Just one symbol, an eye, not for decoration, for protection. This was common among higher-end pieces, where a small inscription could be tucked away like a hidden password to keep away nightmares. Egyptians didn't just believe in restful sleep. They prepared for spiritual chaos the moment their eyes closed. And as you watch the apprentice trace the symbol, you hear the gentle scratching of reed against wood. The same sound that's echoed for centuries in workshops like this. Never loud, always steady. If you're feeling a little sleepy by now, that's understandable. Just picture yourself reclining gently, side sleeping like an Egyptian, your neck perched on a perfectly contoured crescent.
No fluff. No feathers.
Just a cool curve of wood, gently cradling your head beneath a blanket of stars. And if that doesn't lull you, just remember, the man who made that pillow likely spent weeks in silence, sanding your dreams into shape. You're waking up again. Figuratively, of course, because the dreamscape of ancient Egypt isn't quite done with you yet. This time, you're not in the heat or the dust. You're stepping inside, through a modest doorway shaded with linen, into one of the quietest places you've ever imagined. A headrest workshop in full operation, where nobody says a word. You might expect a flurry of activity, grinding wheels, loud calls, maybe someone dropping a hammer with a grunt. But no, the space is hushed. The air is filled with the scent of dry wood, resin, and something else, patience. Maybe here, pillow makers work in low light, mostly natural, their windows covered with finely woven mats to filter out the glaring sun. The silence isn't eerie. It's not oppressive. It's gentle, respectful, almost like a library, but one where every shelf holds curved cradles of sleep. You see one man polishing a half-finished wooden headrest. Another is applying a resin mixture, made from acacia sap and palm oil, to help preserve the wood. There's a rhythm to it all, not coordinated, not synchronized, but naturally unfolding. These people have worked together for so long, they no longer need to talk. They just know. The workshop isn't grand. Maybe 3 or 4 workers at a time, tools laid out neatly on palm fiber mats. Chisels, scrapers, flint flakes, little pots of oil. There's even a horn cup holding what looks like crushed malachite. Not for decoration, but possibly for minor detailing or, if rumors hold any truth, for a symbolic final touch believed to ward off nightmares. In one corner, there's a bench where rejected pieces are stacked. You walk over and lift one, a headrest with a jagged split down its center. A small crack, invisible at first, has ruined hours of work. That's how delicate this process is. It demands slowness, silence, and a kind of devotion modern-day furniture stores just don't require. Interestingly, this silence wasn't always about mysticism. Some Egyptologists think the nature of the materials demanded it. Carving dense woods like tamarisk or imported cedar required intense focus, and no distractions. Whispered mistakes meant broken pieces. And for ivory, one wrong move and that expensive elephant tusk might as well be firewood. Still, others believe there was something more ritualistic at play. According to fringe theories, and we'll label them fringe because no scholar agrees on this, some artisans believed that speech during headrest making could trap unwanted spirits inside the object. So the silence was both a discipline and a form of protection. You don't want a grumpy spirit hanging around someone's neck all night, do you? There's even an old tale, probably apocryphal, about a craftsman whose loud complaints while carving a funerary headrest supposedly resulted in nightmares spreading through an entire village. A punishment from the gods of sleep, or maybe just a coincidental case of food poisoning from spoiled fish. Either way, the lesson stuck. Keep your voice down when shaping dreams. You run your fingers over a nearly finished piece. It's made of carob wood, slightly darker than the rest. The surface is smooth, curved, with just a few simple symbols etched onto the ends, likely denoting the name of the owner or the artisan. But that's rare. Most makers didn't sign their work. Fame wasn't the goal. Steady hands and steady silence were. Outside the door, you hear the muffled thump of sandals and maybe the distant bleating of goats. Inside, all is calm. The pillow makers are immersed in their work. They communicate with slight nods, hand gestures, or maybe just the placement of a tool left conveniently close by .1 elder carver. His back slightly stooped, is sharpening a flint edge against a stone. You can hear the faint scratch as he works. He doesn't look up. He doesn't need to. His hands know what they're doing, more than 50 years of practice, perhaps. He's made headrests for the living and the dead, for newborns and nobles alike, and always with that same methodical stillness. Historians still argue whether these artisans had fixed social status. Were they respected specialists like scribes and physicians, or were they considered common tradesmen, no more remarkable than a basket weaver or brickmaker? The lack of records makes it hard to say. Some tomb art shows headrests lovingly depicted beside more luxurious items. Others show them tucked in corners, barely acknowledged. What we do know is this: their work endured. Headrests survived for thousands of years. Long after the artisans' names were forgotten, their craftsmanship remains, stacked in museum drawers, displayed in glass cases, and tucked into tombs deep beneath desert sands. Back in the workshop, one artisan has just finished polishing a new piece. It glows faintly in the filtered light. He stands, stretches, and places it carefully in a reed basket lined with linen. That might be the last time he touches it. From here, it will be delivered to a household or temple, perhaps even a royal tomb. And when the user rests their head on it, be it for a midday nap or the sleep of eternity, they won't think about the hours of work it took. They'll just feel the smoothness, the quiet curve, the perfect shape, invisible but essential. You step back, taking one last glance around. The artisans are still working, still not talking. The sun moves across the floor in a slow stripe. There's something comforting about it all. The predictability, the soft scrape of wood, the warm stillness that wraps around you like a linen shroud. And as you imagine lying down once more, neck gently lifted by a curve of cedar or acacia, you begin to appreciate the paradox. The most restful objects in the world were made by people who never got to rest. By now, you've adjusted to the pace. You're not rushing to the next monument or memorizing pharaohs' names. You're nestled in the quiet corners of ancient daily life, the parts no one puts on postcards. And today, you're stepping outside again, into a market tucked along the edge of the artisan's quarter. But you're not here for vegetables or sandals. You're here to observe the strangely delicate economy of sleep. Yes, even headrests had their own little slice of commerce. You're standing beside a stall shaded with palm fronds, run by a woman whose name you'll never know but whose skill with pricing and persuasion would put modern mattress salespeople to shame. On the table before her, arranged like fruit in shallow baskets, are headrests of all kinds. Some plain, some painted, some with inscriptions just starting to flake. This is where freshly made headrests went if they weren't commissioned. And you notice quickly, this woman doesn't shout like the melon sellers or the linen merchants. She taps gently on the wood with her knuckle, like testing a melon for ripeness, then glances toward a potential buyer with a raised brow. It's a silent signal. This one's good.
No splinters.
And speaking of splinters, this is a good moment to consider materials. The kind of wood a headrest was made from told you a lot about the sleeper station in life. Acacia was common, tamarisk slightly more refined. Imported cedar? Now you're getting fancy. That stuff came from the Levant, and only the wealthy could afford a pillow that crossed the Sinai. Ivory, of course, was top tier, though you wouldn't see those sold here. They were typically made to order, often inscribed with the owner's name, titles, and in some cases, wishes for a peaceful journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. That's a lot of pressure for one small neck platform. Still, even among these more humble stalls, there's variety. Some headrests have softly beveled bases to avoid catching on the mat during the night. Others are decorated with protective symbols. The Eye of Horus, the Ankh, even small frogs, which were associated with rebirth. You pick one up and feel the smoothness. The woman watches you, expression unreadable, but clearly she's hoping you'll ask the price. But how did one price sleep? Historians still debate whether headrests were considered essential household items or luxury objects. Some tomb inventories list them alongside tools and grain bins as everyday objects. Others treat them like heirlooms. And in temple records, they occasionally appear as tribute items, suggesting they could carry religious weight. In marketplaces like this one, though, pricing likely came down to craftsmanship, material, and demand. If a child had recently grown out of their toddler-sized headrest, and yes, they made those, parents might come seeking a new one. If someone had a dream they couldn't shake, they might trade a handful of lentils for a carved protector. One theory even suggests that after funerals, gently used headrests were sometimes repurposed for the living. Practical, if a little spooky. You watch as a man approaches the stall and gestures at a particularly nice piece. Dark wood, unusually thick neck support. He pantomimes a stiff neck, then shrugs. The woman doesn't laugh, but she does nudge the headrest forward. They exchange a few words, barely more than grunts, and settle on a price. A small measure of beer and a length of linen. And just like that, someone has bought a better night's sleep. You meander through more stalls. Further down, there's a place selling dyes, and next to that, a small kiln where someone is firing what might be ceramic headrests. These were used too, especially in religious contexts. Though not exactly known for comfort, glazed faience pillows were cool to the touch and sometimes believed to offer magical protection. Not ideal for naps, but great if you're prepping for the afterlife. In fact, some of the most stunning headrests we've ever found weren't meant for sleeping at all. They were burial pieces, placed under the mummified heads of nobles and high priests. These were often ornately carved, painted with scenes of protection, sometimes even with spells inscribed along the edges. Not so much sweet dreams, as please don't get eaten by serpents on your way to Osiris. One curious tidbit: a few surviving headrests include deliberate flaws, like a nick in the corner or an asymmetrical cradle. Some scholars think this was superstition-driven, a way to avoid tempting the gods with perfection. Others believe it was just sloppy workmanship. But knowing Egyptians' attention to detail, the flaw was likely intentional, just in case divine beings were watching and got a little too jealous of someone's perfectly shaped nap gear. Back in the marketplace, a boy is playing with a headrest like it's a toy chariot. The stall keeper gives him a sharp look, and he quickly puts it down. You smile, some things never change. Pillows or not, kids find a way to make anything into a game. You pass one final stall where used items are sold. There's a small collection of headrests, slightly worn, gently chipped. These were likely traded in or handed down. And yes, secondhand pillows might sound odd, but in an era without mass production, reusing goods was a matter of survival. And so you leave the marketplace with a clearer picture. The headrest wasn't just a sleeper's tool. It was a product, a trade, a social indicator, and sometimes a quiet heirloom. Whether cradling a farmer's weary neck or guarding a noble's skull in a golden coffin, it served its purpose with calm dignity, and it rarely, if ever, made a sound. You're walking now, not fast, but that slow, meandering pace you adopt when your body is tired but your mind is curious. The market sounds have faded behind you, replaced by the softer hush of palm fronds swaying above and the distant thunk of someone pounding grain. You follow a narrow, sun-dappled path that leads toward a house. Not a palace, not a temple, just a modest, upper-middle-class home. The kind that belonged to scribes, priests, or skilled artisans. Today, you're going to peer into an Egyptian bedroom. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Egyptian homes didn't have bedrooms the way we think of them. No mattress kingdoms, no memory foam fortresses. Just a quiet, shaded corner in the main room. Maybe a raised platform, a mat on the floor, a linen canopy if you were really fancy. And tucked neatly beside this humble sleeping nook, a headrest. This one is made of sycamore fig wood, slightly pale and gently curved. You run your fingers over the polished grain. It's well-loved but sturdy. The base still bears faint incisions, possibly the names of the children in the household, or a blessing scrawled by a family member. It smells of smoke, oil, and time. The room is cool in the way that clay brick homes could be during early mornings. The walls are thick, plastered in a warm cream color, and the air is tinted with the faintest trace of myrrh. There's a low table with a cup of beer, not the foamy European kind, but thick and porridgey. Next to it sits a folded cloth and, curiously, a small figurine of the god Bes. Bes. Here's your mainstream historical moment. Bes was the stubby, lion-faced protector god of households. Not sleek like Ra or mysterious like Osiris. No, Bes was squat, fuzzy, and basically looked like someone crossed a lion with a bar bouncer. But he was beloved, especially as a guardian of sleep. People believed he scared away nightmares, snakes, and other slithery problems that liked to sneak around at night. And you can bet Bes had a close working relationship with the humble headrest. The figurine here might have been placed beside the sleeper as a kind of supernatural security system. No alarms, no flashing lights, just a grumpy-looking deity glaring into the night, daring anything to interrupt your dreams. Now, remember how we talked about symbolic carvings earlier? Look closely at the side of this headrest. There's a single beetle etched into the surface. Scarabs weren't just fashionable amulets, they represented rebirth. It's possible this headrest was used during childbirth recovery, or even passed down from a parent to a child. In some households, a headrest might stay with someone from cradle to tomb. Historians still argue whether headrests were shared objects or highly personal. Did people each have their own, like toothbrushes? Or did they rotate among the household, like a favorite blanket? We don't know. Tombs suggest personal ownership. But households weren't always so rigid, and let's be honest. If you've ever shared a tiny apartment, you know how quickly personal items become communal property. Now picture this. Night has fallen. The clay home is quiet. The baby's been tucked into a wicker crib. The older children sleep curled in linen wraps. And the adults? They rest with their necks propped delicately on curved wood, eyes closed beneath the watchful gaze of Bes. You ease down into their position, just imagining, of course. And surprisingly, it's not that uncomfortable. The cradle of the headrest aligns with your neck, lifting just enough to keep your face out of the dust and your dreams headed in the right direction. But comfort, as it turns out, wasn't the only concern. Egyptians believed in the importance of breath, both literal and spiritual. Elevating the head helped with airflow during the night, preventing blockages or unwelcome spirit interference. According to fringe theories, some even believed your soul might momentarily exit your body during sleep, so lifting your head made it easier for your BA, that little soul bird, to re-enter at dawn. Skeptical? Sure. But it's no stranger than those weighted sleep masks or copper-infused pillowcases we market today. Every culture has its nighttime rituals. Some just last longer than others. There's another reason this particular home is interesting. In the next room, you spot a smaller headrest, tiny, really, barely the width of your hand. Was it a child's? Maybe. Or just maybe it was ceremonial. Used during special festivals, when priests reenacted the awakening of the gods' rituals, processions, prayers, and staged naps meant to mirror divine rest cycles. Yes, ancient Egypt had scheduled naps for gods. Your envy is valid. And here comes your quirky fact of the day. In some temples, a symbolic headrest would be placed beneath the statue of a god during sleeping rites. That way, even stone deities had proper neck support. Imagine being the temple assistant assigned to tiptoe in and gently lift a limestone idol's head for nap time. No pressure. Back in the home, things wind down. The oil lamp flickers lower. The air cools. Outside, the Nile glides by unseen, and inside, the sleeper breathes slowly, rhythmically. One hand curled loosely, the other resting near a reed-woven mat. The headrest doesn't creak. It doesn't complain. It simply supports, quietly, as it always has. You stand again, letting the shadows play across your arms. There's nothing more to disturb here, just people resting the way they always have, trusting a simple piece of wood to cradle their dreams. You step out quietly, careful not to disturb anything, even time. You're outdoors again, though outdoors is a bit generous. You're somewhere between a courtyard and a workshop, a sandy rectangle walled by sun-baked mud brick, with a flat roof held up by simple posts. You can hear the rhythmic whack of tools on wood, the swish of linen robes, and the murmured exchange of greetings between craftsmen who've been working side by side for years. This is where the making happens. You've found yourself in a carpenter's yard, a place where dreams are built, quite literally. Today, your focus is narrowed, not on the grandeur of temples or pyramids, but on the patient, dusty artistry of pillow makers. Their work is silent, slow, and filled with tiny decisions you'd never notice unless you stood right here on a low bench. A man is whittling. The tool is nothing special. A curved copper blade, greenish with age, attached to a wooden handle rubbed smooth by use. But in his hands, it's an extension of intention. You watch as he scrapes along the length of a newly split timber, each stroke gentle, as if he's convincing the wood to become something else. This piece will become a cradle, the curved top of the headrest. It must be precise but not too sharp, supportive but not severe, too steep and the neck cramps, too shallow and it's useless. There's a learned instinct in every cut. And here's your mainstream historical anchor. Headrests were typically made in 3 pieces: the curved cradle, the upright post, and the broad base. These were often carved separately, then joined with wooden pegs or glue made from animal hide. A surprising amount of engineering went into this humble object. The cradle had to hold weight without splintering, the post had to be strong but not bulky, and the base had to be wide enough to stay stable in the night. Today, you're watching a master at work, though he wouldn't call himself that. Just a man who makes things for sleeping. Nearby, another worker polishes a finished headrest with a handful of reeds dipped in oil. He's rubbing in slow, circular motions, and the wood responds, gleaming slightly under the afternoon sun. Once smooth, it might be painted, usually in ochres or blacks, or simply left to age naturally. Wealthier clients might request color or inscriptions, but most just want it to last. Historians still debate whether pillow makers were their own guild or just part of broader carpentry shops. There's no firm evidence of a pillow makers of Thebes union, though wouldn't that be something? But temple records and household inventories suggest that headrests were made by a class of specialized workers who might also build stools, offering tables, and children's toys. Useful things. Quiet things. You glance at a small pile of discards in the corner. Cracked bases, warped cradles, unfinished scraps. Nothing wasted, of course. These will be used for kindling, or possibly carved down into protective amulets. The Egyptians had a saying, "To throw away wood is to lose a god," which is both poetic and a bit intimidating when you're just trying to tidy up. Now here's your fringe tidbit. Some archaeologists have uncovered headrests that show microscopic traces of wax. Not paint, actual beeswax, possibly scented. There's speculation, still debated of course, that certain headrests were rubbed with wax to soften the wood slightly, or to create a particular aroma. Think of it as early aromatherapy. Sleep-enhancing headrests with notes of frankincense and maybe a whisper of honey. As you walk through the workshop, you pass racks of drying pieces. One headrest has an unusual design, a kind of groove carved along the cradle. Not decorative, just functional. Perhaps it was meant to keep braids or hair wraps in place while sleeping. It's a thoughtful little detail, and it tells you the maker was listening to their clients. A child darts past you, barefoot, loud, alive, and disappears through a doorway. You catch sight of a woman shaking her head fondly, wiping her hands on a cloth stained with what might be pomegranate juice. The whole workshop is more than just a factory. It's a living, breathing family space. Tools mix with toys, precision mixes with play. And here's something sweet to consider. Some craftsmen inscribed little messages on the bottom of headrests. Not prayers, not spells, just things like, "Sleep well, my son," or "May this keep your dreams safe." Of course, most of these inscriptions have faded, but a few survive, etched faintly like whispers. They weren't meant for history, they were meant for home. You find yourself watching one headrest being fitted together. The cradle clicks into the post with a hollow, satisfying thunk. The peg is driven in gently, tapped with a mallet that's seen too many seasons. It wobbles just slightly, then stills. The maker runs his thumb along the edge, then sets it down with a small nod. Done. And maybe that's the most astonishing part, how ordinary this feels. There's no ceremony, no grand reveal. Just a man completing a task he's done 100 times. knowing it'll be used in the quietest part of someone's life. His name won't be recorded. His tools will pass to his children, and this headrest will eventually disappear into the dust of time. But for a while, at least, it will cradle someone's dreams. You sit on a worn stone, watching the sunlight shift across the floor. The air smells of sawdust, oil, and a faint trace of cooking lentils. There's comfort in the rhythm here, in knowing that the world has always had people who make small things with care. Things that never make the headlines. Things that never raise their voice. But still, they matter. You're still in the workshop's courtyard when the scent of something familiar drifts by. Linen warmed by sun, with a faint edge of crushed lotus. Someone nearby is folding freshly washed fabric. Not precisely your concern at the moment, but it serves as the perfect segue into today's curious little subplot. The people who decorated headrests. Because yes, some Egyptians wanted a little flair on their neck props. You're about to meet the quietest artists in the land. You walk toward a smaller, shaded alcove where two figures sit cross-legged on mats. One is grinding something into a powder, probably ochre or maybe charcoal. The other holds a headrest across her lap, tilting it just so. You hear only the soft rasp of reed brushes brushing against wood.
No chatter, no drama.
Just the ancient rhythm of pigment meeting grain. This is where headrests get their final touch. Symbols, deities, simple flourishes, or protective spells delicately inked onto the surface. These artisans, often women or apprentices, added the final layer of meaning to an otherwise practical object. Here's your mainstream fact. Many headrests were left plain, especially for poorer households, but others bore carefully drawn hieroglyphs, names, titles, or short blessings. Some had geometric patterns, and a few showed entire miniature scenes. Offerings to a god, lotus flowers unfurling, or a stylized eye of Horus peering eternally from the side. Now imagine this process. Painting fine lines onto curved wood using a reed pen split at the end and dipped in mineral pigment. No sujin, no reduz. Every stroke committed. It's soothing to watch. Like calligraphy with consequences. One of the artists glances up briefly, then returns to her work, dipping the reed again into the black paste. The headrest she's decorating is unusually wide, and she's outlining a scarab beetle flanked by two upright cobras. The scarab, a symbol of rebirth. The cobras, protection in both the waking and sleeping world. Together, they form a quiet declaration. Let me sleep and let me return safely. Historians still argue about the role these artisans played in society. Were they simply laborers, or did they occupy a liminal space, half craftsperson, half priestess? Some theories suggest they were part of temple schools, learning ritual design and sacred proportion. Others believe they were simply family members trained in a specific skill. The truth probably lies somewhere between. As usual, you examine a stack of half-finished pieces nearby. One has a lion-headed goddess painted on its side, likely Sekhmet, fierce and strong. But curiously, her mouth is drawn slightly open, not roaring, but yawning. Was it a mistake, a joke, or a clever nod to sleep? Egyptologists haven't agreed on the intent, but you can't help but smile. Even divine protectors need a nap. Here's your quirky fact for the night. In certain regions, especially around Middle Egypt, families would occasionally bury their headrests in their gardens during plague seasons. Not as offerings, more like protection charms for the soil. Headrests, symbolizing sleep, were thought to invite peaceful rest and ward off restless spirits. It didn't always work, of course, but hey, neither do our lavender diffusers. The artisan finishes her design and holds the piece at arm's length, turning it slowly to examine her work. She doesn't nod. She doesn't smile. She just starts the next one. That's the thing about these jobs. They're not glamorous. They're slow, repetitive, and done mostly for others. But there's dignity in that. There's a kind of steady magic in being the last pair of hands to touch something before it becomes meaningful. You walk to a shelf where finished headrests wait to be delivered. One catches your eye immediately. It's dark, possibly ebony, and the base is unusually thick. A single hieroglyph is painted on the underside, one you can't quite read. The paint has faded, the corners smoothed by years of use. IT feels like a secret object. like something you'd find in a forgotten drawer and hesitate to throw away. You wonder who slept on it, what dreams it held. Did they dream of rivers, of loved ones, of gods? Or maybe they didn't dream at all. Maybe it just supported their head while they waited for sleep, staring at the ceiling. Much like you've done on your most restless nights, you run a fingertip along the painted edge, and for a moment, you're not in a museum of memories. You're part of something active, something continuing. The artists, the sleepers, the dreamers, they're all still here. In the pigments and the grain, a soft breeze passes through the alcove. A cat appears silently, curling up under a table as if to remind you that naps are, and have always been, a universal truth that no grand declarations. No final scene. Just a brush, a breath, a place to rest your neck. And someone, always someone, who took the time to make it beautiful. The sun is beginning its descent now, stretching golden fingers across dusty courtyards and low rooftops. You've wandered from the artisan's alcove into the shaded edge of the city's residential quarter, where narrow streets snake between thick mud brick walls. It's quieter here, not because no one's home, but because this is the hour when people retreat indoors, when dinner simmers and sandals are kicked off, and when, yes, someone might just be lying down for a late afternoon rest on a trusty wooden headrest. Here, in these modest homes, headrests are not symbols of status or artistry. They are tools, used daily, scuffed, repaired, handed down from aunties and uncles who once claimed they made for better dreams. This is where you really see them come alive, not as museum pieces, but as domestic companions. You duck your head into a narrow doorway and find yourself in a family courtyard. A goat tied to a post, a child asleep in a sling, and 3 generations engaged in preparing lentil stew. You're not here to interrupt, just to notice. And what you notice are the headrests. 2, actually. Both resting near a reed mat in the corner. Point 1 is plain, its edges softened by time. The other is chipped, with a small linen pouch tied around its base. A closer look reveals what might be dried herbs inside, perhaps mint or crushed juniper. A homemade sleeping aid? A fragrant superstition? Historians still debate the use of these attachments. Were they functional, meant to deter insects, or spiritual, meant to invoke sweet dreams? The records are silent, but the scent is real. You sit for a while, listening to the gentle clatter of ceramic bowls. A teenage boy walks past and gives the headrest a casual nudge with his foot. An old habit, perhaps, to reposition it before lying down. To him, it's as normal as a pillow is to you. Maybe more so. Here's your mainstream fact. In many Egyptian homes, the headrest was stored near the sleeping mat during the day and moved into place at night. It often shared space with a small oil lamp, a reed fan, and maybe, if you were lucky, a folded linen sheet. Bedrooms were usually communal, with the whole family curled on mats, headrests positioned neatly like little sentinels. But the real charm lies in the fringe. Some households kept dream tokens alongside the headrest, tiny carved animals, or symbolic figures of Bes, the protective dwarf god known for guarding against nightmares. You spot one now, a small amulet shaped like a lion with exaggerated teeth, tucked beneath the base of the wooden stand. The family didn't just sleep, they prepared to sleep, as if sleep were something you could rehearse. Children played games with these amulets, too. One popular one involved hiding the token beneath someone's headrest, then seeing if they dreamed of lions or laughing gods. If they did, the amulet worked. If not, well, try again tomorrow. Honestly, not that different from dream catchers hanging above beds in modern nurseries. A woman nearby catches you looking and laughs quietly. She gestures toward the more worn headrest and mutters something that roughly translates to, "That one belonged to his grandfather." He snored like a dying crocodile. Everyone chuckles. The child in the sling stirs, but doesn't wake that it's here. In these small, domestic stories, that headrests reveal their full life. Not just crafted objects, but part of rituals. Who sleeps where, who gets the good one, whose dreams need extra protection tonight. You can picture a sleepy voice asking, "Where's my headrest?" and a sibling replying, "You left it in the goat pen again." Here's a quieter fringe detail. Some headrests were made adjustable. Not with gears or hinges, don't get ahead of the era, but with small interchangeable posts or inserts that could be swapped out for height. perfect for when your neck grew longer or your preferences changed. Sleep Ergonomics Ancient Edition. You rest your own head on one just briefly. It's not plush. In fact, it's angular. And yet, there's a curious comfort in its certainty. It doesn't squish or slide. It simply is. Solid. Predictable. Like a friend who doesn't say much, but shows up every night anyway. The family begins to set out bowls for the evening meal. There's laughter, clinking dishes, a soft chorus of, "Not yet, wait your turn," in varying tones of affection and exasperation. You ease back out of the courtyard, leaving them to their rhythm. The scent of lentils trails after you like a ribbon. Back on the path, you pass another home with a headrest perched in the windowsill, drying, perhaps, or airing out. It's cracked but cared for, wrapped at the joint with a strip of old linen. Someone chose not to throw it out. Someone believed it still had a few more dreams in it. And that's the thing with these headrests. They weren't showpieces. They were personal, a little awkward, a little stiff, but utterly dependable. Not unlike the kind of person who remembers your favorite bread or always saves you a seat. You continue walking as the sun dips lower, casting long shadows on the ground. Somewhere nearby, someone is already drifting off, cheek resting awkwardly against polished wood, dreams curling around their feet like soft cats. And the headrest? It just listens. You've moved deeper into the city's quiet core, where the sandstone walls glow warm and golden and the alleys feel almost velvety underfoot. A stray donkey blinks at you lazily as it chews on something that probably wasn't meant to be food. The air has stilled, wrapped in that gentle hush that descends when dinner's done and sleep becomes the next big event. This is where you stumble, almost literally, upon a curious sight. A small street-side repair stall. Not for sandals or pottery. Not for carts or copper pans. For headrests. An older man sits hunched on a low stool, using what looks like a shard of obsidian to shave down the edge of a wooden support. Beside him is a stack of lopsided, cracked, or crooked headrests in various states of disrepair. One even looks like it's been scorched, perhaps from resting too close to a cooking flame. His tools are simple scrapers, reed glue, a few linen strips, but his touch is practiced. Quiet, confident, reverent, almost. Here's your mainstream fact. Headrests weren't always replaced when damaged. In many households, they were repaired, repurposed, or even ritualistically buried if deemed spent. Egyptians didn't see objects as disposable, especially ones tied to the intimate realm of sleep. A cracked headrest might be patched, then passed down to a child, or cut down and used as a child's first sleeping prop, a rite of passage into big person dreams. The old man notices you watching and lifts the edge of a headrest to show you the repair. A delicate join reinforced with fish glue and wrapped in papyrus twine. It's precise, thoughtful. You suspect the headrest may now be stronger than before, like a bone that's healed with a scar. Historians still argue about whether repair was seen as a spiritual act. Some believe mending sacred objects like headrests carried ritual weight. Perhaps the mender whispered blessings while tying the knots. Others think it was strictly practical. Sleep was sleep, after all. You needed your neck elevated whether your headrest had character or not. But in this case, watching the old man hum quietly to himself as he sands a fresh joint, it's hard not to feel there's something ceremonial in it. He's not just fixing wood. He's preserving dreams. He sets one aside. A headrest whose base had split diagonally down the center. Now it's bound by a clever insert. A thin copper plate hammered into the crack. A recent innovation. A family improvisation. Possibly both. And here's your fringe tidbit. In some tombs, archaeologists have found headrests intentionally broken and then carefully mended with metal fastenings. Was this symbolic? Meant to reflect the cycle of breaking and renewal in the afterlife? Or was it just a sleeper's favorite neck rest, too precious to discard even in death? The records don't say. The headrests don't speak. But their silence is eloquent. The old man shows you a special drawer where he keeps discarded decorative pieces, carved lotus petals, flaked paint shards, and one very small ivory inlay in the shape of a vulture. He tells you, through a series of hand gestures and knowing smiles, that some customers ask for specific motifs to be added during repair. Others just want their headrest back the way it was, as though it hadn't been burned, chewed by a goat, or dropped into the Nile during fishing season. You imagine someone bringing a broken headrest to this very spot, eyes wide with worry, saying, "It just slipped," and this man nodding solemnly, already reaching for the glue. The unsung hero of the neighborhood. Here's something unexpectedly sweet. In some rare cases, people requested that a loved one's headrest be turned into a small shrine after their passing. The curve would be removed and mounted upright. An amulet added, a flower offering tucked beside it. Not because the headrest was magical, but because it was familiar. It held a shape their loved one had worn into it over years of sleep. You glance at the stack beside him again. So many shapes, so many dreams. One of them, slender and dark with faded etchings, still carries a faint smell of oils. The man taps it gently, lifts it toward the light, and says something that roughly translates to, "This one carried 40 years of dreams, still good for 10 more. You smile and he shrugs. It's just a job. But it's not just a job. He hands you a reed-wrapped packet. A gesture of trust, perhaps, or simply habit. Inside is a palm-sized wedge of acacia wood, a starter block, the kind from which a headrest is born. You run your thumb over it. It smells sharp and clean, and for a moment you can almost imagine whittling it down yourself, sanding it smooth, carving a name into its base. Who knows? Maybe you'd be good at this. The silent trade of dreams. The light fades further, but the man doesn't stop working. You leave him there, head bent over wood and linen, an old song hummed just under his breath. Behind him, the repaired headrests wait quietly, lined up like small wooden ships ready to carry someone, anyone, into sleep. You've left behind the soft scrape of the repairman's blade, and now the streets are quieter than ever. The sky turns bruised lilac overhead, and even the pigeons seem too tired to flap. A dog yawns theatrically, then flops over without concern. It's the hour where the city exhales, when fires are banked, stories end mid-sentence, and even the Nile seems to hush. Tonight, you're headed somewhere stranger, past the family courtyards and the craftsman's stalls. Through a crooked archway lined with flickering oil lamps, you enter the quarters of the temple attendants. And here's where things get interesting. These are the sacred sleepers. Now, you might think priests of ancient Egypt spent their nights in endless ceremony, chanting, pacing, feeding gods invisible feasts. And yes, a lot of that happened, but many also practiced incubation, a ritual form of dreaming used to receive divine messages. And for that, they needed to sleep. Specifically, they needed to sleep well. Enter the ceremonial headrest. Unlike the humble versions you saw earlier, these headrests were carved from alabaster or polished ebony, sometimes inlaid with lapis lazuli. Their curves were gentle but deliberate, measured to hold the dreaming head of someone who might wake up with instructions from a falcon-headed deity. No pressure. Here's your mainstream fact. Dream incubation was practiced in select temples, including those dedicated to Imhotep and Serket. Supplicants would sometimes sleep on temple grounds hoping for visions. Priests would do the same in an attempt to divine healing techniques, upcoming floods, or the gods' opinions on very earthly politics. Some temples even had special dream chambers. Quiet, perfumed, and extremely well guarded. You slip through one such chamber now. Narrow, cool, and lined with woven mats. The scent is heavy with blue lotus. A priest sits cross-legged near the back, eyes closed, fingers resting lightly on a carved headrest beside him. You can almost hear his breath counting down toward the edge of sleep. But here's the fun, fringe tidbit. Some ceremonial headrests were noisy, not with bells or chimes, but carved to creak faintly when shifted. The idea? If the sleeper tossed or turned too much, the sound would be heard by the temple watcher, who might gently wake them, or record the dream as incomplete. Dreaming, after all, was serious business. You couldn't have your divine vision jostled by a stiff neck or a runaway snore. Historians still argue about how literal these dream recordings were. Did they write down every vision? Did they interpret metaphor? Or were some dreams political statements cloaked in spiritual garb? After all, nothing says stop raising taxes like a dramatic dream about a crocodile god frowning at your granaries. You settle near the edge of the chamber and let yourself imagine it. The hush of the room, the shift of linen robes, the crackle of a wick struggling to stay lit. Somewhere, a priest exhales, and the dream begins. Maybe it's a field of wheat with eyes. Maybe it's a lion reciting proverbs in Old Egyptian. Maybe it's just silence. Not every night yields prophecy. One priest is said to have dreamed an entire hymn, including musical notes. Another saw himself planting reeds in the sky. And then there's the record of a woman who entered the temple for healing and dreamt only of frogs playing drums. No follow-up notes, just frogs. History is silent on whether her insomnia improved. The temple headrests were stored with care, sometimes wrapped in linen, sometimes dabbed with scented oils. They weren't owned by the priests, but shared as tools of the craft. You see one now, resting on a low shelf. It's darker than most, almost purple-black. The base has a single painted eye on it, not ominous but watchful. Protective. As you sit quietly, a priest nearby begins softly chanting, not to the room, but to himself. It's a lullaby of sorts, for his mind. You hear the phrase, Sa Ank Iamai Senu. Protection and life be in your sleep. His voice fades to a whisper. The headrest does the rest. Here's a clever little fringe detail. Some temples had stand-in dreamers, people selected for their reputation as vivid dreamers or lucid dreamers, used like oracles. They'd sleep on special headrests in particular rooms, tasked with dreaming on behalf of someone else. Divine outsourcing, basically. You dream, I interpret, everyone wins. You sit for a while longer, cradled by the room's quiet gravity. There's something humbling about being among professional dreamers, people who trained not for battle or governance or art, but for stillness, for listening to the strange, symbolic theater of the unconscious, with a wooden headrest as their stage prop. Eventually, a watcher gestures that it's time to go. Dreams, after all, are private, even sacred ones. You step out into the cool night and blink at the stars beginning to unroll themselves across the sky. You can't help but wonder what you'll dream tonight. Hopefully nothing involving frog percussion. The temple has fallen behind you now, like a slow tide receding. The air feels cooler, softer, tinged with the kind of silence that isn't quite empty, just full of things not being said. You walk past a row of date palms standing like sleepy sentries, their fronds barely rustling, and find yourself approaching the outskirts of a large house. No pyramid, but it belongs to someone wealthy, and very asleep. But tonight, you're not here to meet the owners. You're here for the house staff, the invisible hands of comfort, specifically the linen attendants. This part of the journey might sound like a long nap in itself, and honestly, that fits, because now you're stepping into a world of folding, fluffing, steeping, and tucking, the slow, rhythmic rituals of preparing someone else's perfect sleep. You duck through a servant's entrance. No guards, just a friendly goose that honks once and then loses interest. Inside, the work has already begun. Your mainstream fact here: linen was the textile king of ancient Egypt, clothed the living and the dead. And when it came to bedding, linen wasn't just a material, it was a mood. Crisp when freshly woven, soft when worn in, pale white, often bleached in the sun or steeped in natron to remove oils and give it that ghostly shimmer. Rich households kept linen specifically for bedding, rotated by season, sometimes even perfumed with marjoram or frankincense. You pass a servant carefully folding a long strip of linen that looks more like a ribbon than a sheet. She's not rushing. She's smoothing it with her fingers, inspecting it against the lamplight, checking for snags. Another worker passes by with a clay pot of oil and a small reed brush. Linen edges were sometimes brushed with oil to keep them from curling. That's dedication, or maybe just job security. You arrive at the sleeping quarters, where another servant is preparing a headrest. Not carving, not repairing, not even polishing, just arranging. This too is part of the routine. You see, even in wealthy homes, headrests weren't dumped haphazardly by a pillow pile. They were placed with intention, aligned to catch the breeze from the doorway, positioned to face a preferred direction, often toward the Nile. If the sleeper was sick or superstitious, or both, a servant might tuck a small amulet beneath the base. One woman once kept a tiny carving of a hedgehog under hers. For protection, supposedly, or maybe just comfort. Who's to say? And here's a charming little fringe tidbit. Some elite households owned seasonal headrests, slightly higher ones for winter months to catch the rising warmth from a brazier, and lower, cooler ones for summer, shaped to funnel breezes toward the nape of the neck. Were they marked? Probably not. But a good linen attendant knew which was which. Historians still argue whether the elaborate bedtime routines of elite Egyptians were purely functional or carried symbolic meaning. Was the careful folding and positioning of linen simply about airflow and hygiene? Or was it part of a broader spiritual choreography, like turning the body into a temple at rest? Arguments get heated, ironically, over a very chill subject. You watch now as a servant lights a cone of scented resin and places it by the headrest. Not too close, just enough to let the smoke drift lazily across the linens. The sleeper won't smell it until they turn.
A tiny sensory surprise.
Thoughtful, isn't it? Some elite beds were built slightly elevated, more a platform than a frame, with linen stretched tight over wooden struts like a hammock without the sag. Over that came soft pads or reeds, and finally the linen. All this effort just to sleep with your head 2 inches off the surface. But in this culture, comfort wasn't indulgence. It was dignity. You spot a clay basin near the bed with cool water and a linen cloth. The sleeper will use it to rinse their face before bed. Or, more likely, the attendant will do it for them. Gently, reverently, you start to realize something quietly profound. This wasn't just about hygiene. It was about transition. From wake to sleep, from self to soul, from the bustle of the day to the dreamlike pause of the night. And here's something even more peculiar. Certain servants were trained to remember their master's dreams. Not interpret them, just remember them. A lord might wake, mutter a few disjointed symbols, and roll over. The attendant would commit it to memory and report it to a priest or scribe the next morning. No pressure. The last servant fluffs the linen coverlet. Not a blanket, exactly, but a light woven drape, and steps back. The headrest gleams faintly in the lamp glow. Everything smells faintly of saffron and warm clay. It's oddly moving, really, not because it's grand, but because it's intimate, quiet, entirely meant for someone else. You can't help but picture yourself tucked into that bed, linen cool against your back, headrest cradling your neck, distant river breeze just brushing your skin. Would you sleep deeply? Would your dreams stretch like riverboats drifting downstream? Would you wake remembering anything at all? The attendants are finished. They move in practiced silence, taking up their tools, whispering barely audible goodnights to one another. One of them gently closes the wooden shutter with a soft click. And just like that, the sleeper's world is ready. Head nestled, body stretched, linen tucked, dreams waiting. By now, the city has surrendered entirely to sleep. The stars press down, thick and unblinking, while the sounds of distant frogs rise like bubbles from the Nile's reeds. You walk through a grove of sycamore fig trees where the wind hums in lazy spirals, and you wonder how many other feet have padded along the same dusty path after dusk. Priests, farmers, scribes, and yes, pillow makers, your destination tonight is something rarer. The resting place of a merchant. Not a temple dweller, not a noble, but a clever trader whose fortunes rose and fell with the creak of camel saddles and the flow of goods downriver. And you're here for something oddly specific. Travel pillows. Not the U-shaped foam ones we know today, no, these were wooden, linen-wrapped, often portable, and considered a mark of personal dignity. Because even on the road, a person deserved proper sleep. The mainstream historical fact, long-distance trade in ancient Egypt, especially during the Middle and New Kingdoms, involved extensive travel by donkey, boat, and sandaled foot. Traders slept in caravanserais, guest homes, or directly under the stars. Many carried personal headrests carved to fold or pack tightly, and sometimes even wrapped in fabric bearing their names or a simple blessing. You come to a small caravan courtyard. No palace, just a walled compound with a low fire burning and a few mules already half asleep. A grizzled merchant sits nearby, rubbing his feet and chuckling at something you'll never know. Behind him, you spot it. A traveling headrest, no taller than your forearm, wrapped in dyed linen and tied with a loop of cord. Practical, personal, predictably uncomfortable. Here's a delightfully fringed tidbit. Some traveling merchants believed that sleeping without your own headrest invited bad dreams. Not just discomfort, but actual spiritual mischief. One old belief held that your ka, your spiritual double, needed something familiar to dock itself at night. No headrest and your ka might drift too far, or return with secrets it wasn't supposed to notice. Oh yes, merchants invested in travel pillows like we invest in noise-canceling headphones. Not for luxury, but for self-preservation. You watch as the merchant slowly unwinds the linen wrap. Inside is a narrow wooden base, slightly curved on top, with a faint engraving. A sycamore tree, and below it, a fish. Is it a family symbol? A prayer? Or just something to fidget with while waiting for sleep? Historians still argue about the use of symbols on personal bedding items. Some say they were protective talismans. Others argue they were just decorative, essentially monograms with extra mystique. The merchant sets the headrest down beside his mat, arranges a thin blanket over his legs, and tips his head slowly back. His eyes flutter shut. There's something comforting in the image, proof that no matter your trade, your status, or your miles traveled, sleep is a ceremony worth performing well. And now you notice something curious. One of his porters is settling in nearby with an identical headrest, but the top is painted a different color. Red ochre. Not fancy, just different. You lean closer and spot a tiny chip at one end. The man sees you looking and says with a sleepy grin, "It creaks on one side. Helps me know I'm still alive." That's not just poetic. It's surprisingly common. Many travelers favored headrests that made a small sound when shifted, to alert them if they were being approached in the night. A personal alarm system disguised as sleep furniture. Clever, no? A third man has nothing but a roll of woven reeds for his head. He shrugs when you glance his way and mutters, "Didn't pack light for the gods, only the road." He grins and adds, "If I snore too loud, they'll trade me for a better dreamer." The others laugh quietly. Even tired men make room for sleep jokes. But here's what's surprisingly moving. These men, hard-traveled and sunburnt, still take time to arrange their sleep spaces. One pats down the sand beneath his mat. Another turns his headrest slightly eastward, toward Memphis. One murmurs something about a sweet date seller in Thebes and then yawns so wide you're almost caught in it. Hits you then. These aren't just accessories. They're rituals, anchors, in a life where cities come and go, where goods are weighed and lost and taxed and stolen. These tiny wooden cradles for your skull, they're sacred, not because they're fancy, because they're yours. Historians still debate whether these headrests were passed down or replaced regularly. Some argue for generational objects, polished smooth over years of use. Others note that many found in graves show minimal wear, suggesting they may have been made specifically for burial, like buying a brand new mattress just to lie in once, forever. You sit with the thought as the fire crackles low. The merchant has fallen asleep now, one hand resting gently on the cord of his wrapped headrest, as if to say, "This is mine, my own private world, where no one haggles, no one shouts, and the only sound is breath moving in and out like the Nile." You stretch out beside him. Not too close, personal space is timeless, after all. You rest your neck on an imaginary curve of wood, softened by imagined linen, and let yourself match the rhythm of the sleeping men around you. The night is long. The roads will wait. For now, you have a headrest, a breeze, and the quiet company of people who understand that sleep, like trade, is an art. A rooster calls faintly in the distance, not in urgency, but like it forgot what time it was and gave it a try anyway. The caravan courtyard fades behind you, each sleeper folded into linen, breath, and dreams. You pass under a carved lintel into a quieter alley, lit by stars and the occasional firefly. Somewhere ahead is your final stop tonight, the workshop of the old man who fixes broken headrests. Not the glamorous end of the craft, but, let's be honest, you weren't exactly expecting a dramatic finale. This is boring history for sleep. Remember? And in a world that worshipped function as much as form, The humble repairers were part of the story too. You approach a doorway framed by reeds and clay, with a small mark scratched on the wall beside it. An ank and a chisel. A sleepy pun, maybe. Life, but with repairs. Inside, the workshop smells of oil, dust, and time. There's no one around, just a lantern left burning low, casting gold halos over wooden scraps and linen piles. And in the middle, slumped over his work table like he dozed mid-thought, is the headrest doctor himself. You step softly, peering over his shoulder. He's not actually asleep, just thinking with his eyes closed. A true artisan's nap. He stirs and waves you over without opening them. Come to complain or to learn? A little of both. The mainstream historical fact here is simple. Wooden headrests broke. All the time. Carved from acacia, tamarisk, or imported cedar if you were rich. They were durable but not indestructible. Cracks from weight, chips at the edges, or snapped joints from careless packing during travel were all common. And there were specialists who fixed them. Sometimes priests, sometimes carpenters, sometimes old men like this, who knew with the way scribes knew ink. He turns over a headrest with a missing top. The cradle cracked, he mutters, because someone used it as a stool. You nod solemnly, as if this is the greatest sacrilege you've heard all night. Honestly, it might be. And here's a delightful fringe detail. Some repairers believed that headrests absorbed dreams. Not metaphorically, literally soaked in whatever images your ka conjured each night. Which meant that when one broke, you didn't just glue it. You had to release the dreams. Some sprinkled natron on the wood. Others left them in sunlight for a day. One very dramatic craftsman reportedly recited a spell from the Book of the Dead and then spat on the crack. To each their process. You watch now as the old man uses a tool that looks like a tiny bronze pick to chip away a splintered edge. His fingers are steady. He doesn't rush. There's no such thing as fast sleep, after all. He sands, oils, and gently presses two pieces together, binding them with softened linen dipped in resin. Leave it for a day, he says, and it's as good as memory. Historians still argue whether the care shown to headrest repairs indicates a spiritual respect or simply economic practicality. Some say it proves the object's sacred link to sleep and the soul. Others say, well, wood was expensive and nobody wants to sleep with their neck at a weird angle. The old man chuckles now, rummaging in a drawer until he pulls out something curious. A broken headrest with a faint hieroglyph along its base. He tilts it toward you. This one belonged to a temple scribe, he explains. He said it squeaked every time he lied in his dreams. You grin, then try not to. He's serious. Deadpan as bedrock, he waves you toward the shelves, where repaired pieces sit like sleeping pets. Some gleam with fresh polish, others are worn smooth at the edges, like they've been held through storms of thought. Each one different, each one meant for a specific body, a specific weight of head, a specific pattern of breath. People think dreams are all the same, the old man mutters, but they weigh different. Some bend the wood, some snap it. He eyes you. What kind do you carry? You shrug, unsure whether it's a joke or a test. He grins. Heavy ones, I can tell. He taps the headrest before him. This one cracked straight down the middle, like someone woke up too fast. Another fringe tidbit for you. Some Egyptians believed that if you woke too suddenly, your ba, your roaming spirit, might not return in time. That's why some headrests were painted or wrapped with small guiding patterns, like runway lights, gently calling the spirit home. This old man, he doesn't carve new ones anymore. Too much ego in fresh wood, he says. Better to fix what's been used. It already knows how to rest. You linger as he oils another finished repair, the scent of cedar rising faintly. His movements are hypnotic, like brushing sand from stone. You feel yourself swaying slightly, like a candle's flame caught in a breeze. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because everything here insists on slowing down. You think back, through the pyramid vaults, the temple storerooms, the linen tenders, the traders on their mats. All the heads, all the dreams, all the hands that carved, wrapped, positioned, and repaired. It's a whole civilization shaped by the pursuit of sleep. Not as laziness, but as precision, as art. And here, in this little workshop tucked between alleyways, You've found its last quiet echo. The old man yawns. Not dramatically, just enough to make you do the same. He gestures to a patched stool by the wall. You can rest there if you like. Dream light, wake slow, and with that blessing you do. You wake to the faintest suggestion of dawn. Not light, not yet, just a softening of the darkness, like someone whispering that morning is thinking about arriving. The old man is gone, or maybe never was. The little workshop is silent, except for the occasional creak of wood cooling from the night air. You rise slowly, neck surprisingly comfortable from that makeshift seat, and step outside. The alley is still, bathed in the soft hush that only pre-dawn brings. The air smells like baked earth and wood smoke, with the faintest edge of river mud. A thin cat darts past, then vanishes under a crate, not bothering with you. She's clearly got places to be, and now you return, in no great rush, to the home of the pillow maker himself. You know the way by heart, past the courtyard with the sleepy merchant, through the lane where the linen hung in whispering rows, around the corner where the acacia tree leans in, always nosy, always listening. At the far end, a doorway without markings, just an old reed mat, rolled and leaning like a dozing snake. Inside, it's cool and dim. You've arrived at a moment between moments. The pillow maker isn't working yet, but he isn't asleep either. He's kneeling over a low table, gently wrapping a finished headrest in linen. The mainstream historical fact: in Egypt's New Kingdom period, some pillow makers prepared a headrest not just for use in life, but specifically for burial. These weren't flashy, no gold or inlays, but finely made, smoothed, wrapped in clean cloth, and laid beside the body or beneath the head. In some tombs, they found wooden headrests placed under painted mummy masks, a final cradle for the Ka. Today, the pillow maker works on such a piece. The curves are exact, the joinery invisible, a symbol, a lotus blossom, burned faintly into the underside. You can almost feel it, how it would lift the base of your skull, how it would tilt your dreaming just slightly forward, toward something beyond breath. But this one is for the dead, wrapped gently, tied with care. Now for the fringe detail, an oddity whispered among the oldest pillow-making families. Some claimed that the best headrests called their sleeper. If you made one well balanced, blessed, beautiful, it would dream before it ever touched a head. If you listen close, one craftsman reportedly said, "It hums in the quiet. That's when you know it's ready." You pause. The room is quiet enough to test that theory. You lean close, and while there's no hum exactly, there is a kind of presence, the feeling of something complete, not fancy, just finished. The pillow maker sighs and sits back, dusting his palms. His knees crack softly. He smiles at you, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Made too well," he mutters. "Now I want to lie on it." He gestures to a bench and reaches for a plain headrest nearby, his own, worn with a small crack in the curve.
Familiar.
Trusted. Historians still argue, he says suddenly, whether we shaped the dream or if the dream shaped us. You blink. It's the first time he's said anything remotely philosophical. He shrugs. Doesn't matter. You still have to shape the wood. And that, perhaps, is the heart of it all. You glance around the workshop. Here, everything is quiet, but never still. Tools rest at angles. Linen strips hang waiting to be tied, and half-shaped blanks lie curled like sleeping animals. It's a place that understands rest, but doesn't insist on it. The kind of place where time softens, like resin warming in the sun. And now the pillow maker stretches, arms up, back cracking gently, and begins to sweep the floor. Not because it needs it, because that's how you begin the day. Quiet work.
Familiar motions.
Let the mind rest, let the body wake. His broom stirs a little dust, a few feathers, a fallen date pit from last night's snack. You find your place on the bench and watch. The sweep of straw, the hiss of sand, the slow loop of routine that is, in its way, as sacred as any temple rite. Maybe that's what you've been chasing all night. Not just the history of headrests, but the rhythm of their making. The sound a knife makes against wood. The whisper of linen being pulled taut. The hush of a room just before dawn, waiting for the first brush of sleep's twin. Waking, and you, dear sleeper, you've made it far. Through storerooms and tombs, caravans and workshops, dreams and repairs. Your head, imaginary or not, has rested on acacia, tamarisk, cedar, linen, reed. It has dreamed of crocodile dung sunscreen and linen whisperers, of gods who breathe protection into curves of wood. And now, before the light fully arrives, it's time to lie back again. Point one last time. One last sleep. The pillow maker dims the lamp. Not extinguishes, just softens. The glow dulls to gold, then amber, then the color of memory. You lean back. Let your neck find its cradle. Let your breath slow. Let the world hush. There's nothing left to chase. No more facts, no more footnotes. Just the rhythm of ancient dust settling, of linen folding itself, of dreams arriving on sandaled feet. You're almost weightless now. Not floating exactly, just unburdened. The kind of lightness that only arrives when the world has gone very still, and the last thoughts have tucked themselves in neatly, like linen corners folded at dawn. Somewhere nearby, the pillow maker snores. Not loudly, just a gentle rhythm, like waves on a riverbank. You lie there, quiet, and let yourself notice all the things you missed before. The brushstroke pattern on the woven mat beneath you, the scent of crushed myrrh resin, faint but persistent, like the memory of incense in a temple long after the ceremony has ended. The slow breath of the city itself exhaling before it begins again. This, you realize, is where the story doesn't end. It simply lays down to rest. Because here's the thing about ancient Egypt. For all the grandeur of pyramids and battles and gods, most people simply lived. Quietly, repetitively. They woke, they worked, they made things, they repaired things. And then they went to sleep. Just like you, tonight you've wandered with the makers. Not the warriors or kings, but the fixers and weavers, the traders and sweepers. The ones who made sure necks didn't cramp, dreams didn't drift too far, and the soul had a comfortable place to return to at night. You followed the arc of something beautifully ordinary. And now, one final fringe detail to tuck in beside your dream like a tiny amulet. Some headrests, particularly those used in burials, were carved with small protective spells. Not grand ones, just quiet assurances. May your sleep be without trouble. May your dreams find the west. May your ka rest gently and return gladly. Historians still argue over whether these inscriptions were religious declarations or simply habit. But does it matter? A comfort repeated often enough becomes its own kind of truth. The pillow maker stirs, mutters something in his sleep. Maybe a name, maybe a memory, and settles again. You lie back once more. And as your breath softens to match the hush around you, you feel something give way inside your chest. A tension you didn't know you were holding. It releases like a knot finally unlooped. You're not just learning history anymore. You're part of it now, resting inside it, surrounded by 1,000 years of quiet effort. The workshop fades, the alley fades, the entire city folds into silence, like linen drawn over a resting face. And now, dear listener, we'll slow things even further. Let's wind it all down together. You're lying still now, your breath soft and steady. The stories are behind you. Gentle footsteps in the sand, fading further with each exhale. Let your shoulders relax just a little more. Let your fingers unclench. Let your jaw soften. There's nothing to hold, nothing to remember. Just this moment, and the next, each one quieter than the last. Picture the Nile flowing slow in the distance, silver in the moonlight. The reeds rustle, but there's no urgency. Just the night, and the river, and you. The pillow beneath your head is smooth, perfectly shaped for your neck, whether it's linen-wrapped wood or something softer. It supports you gently, inviting your thoughts to melt and pool like warm resin. You don't have to follow them anymore. They'll wander off on their own, like little boats drifting from shore. Maybe you dream tonight, maybe you don't. Maybe your spirit takes a slow walk through the field of reeds, nodding to old friends and forgotten gods. Maybe it just rests close by, curled like a cat, waiting for you to rise again. But not yet. For now, there's only this, the quiet hum of ancient stories, the memory of sand, The warmth of Warren would beneath your dreaming head, and sleep, deep, dreamless sleep, wrapping itself around you like soft linen in the dark. You're safe. You're home.